What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Welcome to the Lead Counsel podcast. This is your host, Tom Tona. I'm joined today by my good friend, co-host, marketing person, Jules. Jules, what's up?
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So today we have a special guest, Chris Earley, Massachusetts personal injury attorney. Chris is a good friend. Met him at a mastermind about 6 months ago, but we had been connected on LinkedIn for quite some time. Chris is a very well-known personal injury attorney in Massachusetts, and he's been a personal injury attorney and the owner of his own firm for almost 20 years. Chris has a really unconventional story in terms of his upbringing and his childhood that gave him what he thinks are a competitive advantage and almost superpowers, if you will. So he's really come to embrace the childhood that he had, and he's really leaned into it, and he's building a great business with a great team. He's got 14 people on his team right now. And today we're going to be talking about trauma, taking risks, and living the life that you want to live. So, Chris, Jules, welcome everybody to the show.
Hello. Welcome, Chris. We're glad to have you on.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. Thank you so very much.
So, Chris, I'm excited because, you and I met at the John Fisher Mastermind in the city, and I was super excited talking to you about podcasting and stuff. I know you also have your own podcast, right?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
And what's the name of it?
The Early Show.
Awesome. I love that. I think about your name all the time because you have the name that was built for marketing. It's just awesome.
Thank you.
It really is. Your newsletter, I just subscribed to it on LinkedIn. I think it's awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Chris, I gave the intro a little bit and as an intro to the show, but give us a bit of your background, because when you and I met at the mastermind, I don't want to disclose too much, right? It was a lot of personal stuff that we went over, but you had a really fascinating background that I think you kind of have described it as almost creating superpowers for you, right? Like you feel like it gives you a competitive edge. So tell us a little bit about who you are and how it shaped who you are today.
Sure. Again, just want to say thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate this. So I'm first and foremost a family man. I'm married with 2 kids, and my focus really is to be the best father that I can be, because my father had a very sad demise. He was a very, very bad alcoholic. He was a very successful executive in Manhattan. He had his own business, but alcohol leveled him literally to the streets. He became homeless. And so my mom raised me, just she and I, and she really kind of helped sort of me along on a path to success, put me in private schools. And so fast forward to today, I owe my work ethic to her grit to her. So I think, Tom, my competitive advantage over my competitors here in my area is that I heard things, saw things that just sort of stay with you, and they give you that edge. You don't want to fail. And it's this like my hair's on fire just to really work hard and do the best I can for my family. But that's sort of my backstory. It sounds negative, but I look at it as a total blessing. Like, I am the most blessed dude out there because of the story, that I didn't become a statistic. There's a lot of luck involved here, but with some, like I said, grit, hard work, a doting, devoted, obsessed mother on making sure her kid did something with his life. And she got through such adversity to help me with those opportunities. I try to take advantage. And now today, Tom, just trying to run a special law firm built on core values. You're into core values.
Oh, yeah.
You and I just really speak the same language, and that's why I'm really excited to talk with you.
Can I ask what your firm's core values are?
We have 5 of them. Our core values are 5-star client service. We're hardworking. We communicate well. We don't play games, and we give back to the community. Those are the values in which everything is decided here at the Early Law.
Yeah, and again, I can tell we talk a lot, and it's not just words on a plaque, right? Like for you, and you're much like me, and I think that's why we became fast friends, is because you live them every day, right? I follow you very closely. I read your newsletter, and I know it's not just words on a placard.
That's right. It's easy to create 5 core values, 7 core values, whatever, but, to live them. And again, Tom, this is going back, I think childhood is really important, right? For better or worse, that's how you were kind of stamped and impressed upon as a kid. So these core values to me are important, right? Well, my dad was in shelters, Tom. So it's like getting the community is legit service in my mind, working hard, not playing games, being really ethical, doing the right thing. Those values, and I'm sure you would agree, that's how you base your hiring decisions, your firing decisions, cases you take on, cases you reject. It simplifies everything, right? You run a big firm, and kudos to you. You have built up a really impressive firm. I know what it takes, right? You've put a lot into that.
Right.
You're not just flying by the seat of your pants, right? It's a very principled, focused approach. And at the end of the day, it's culture, right? Culture, core values. Because if we don't have that, what are we doing? What's the point of all of this, right?
You hit it right on the head. For me, we have 6 core values. I've talked about them ad nauseum. Anybody that follows me knows what we talk about. But it's literally a roadmap for your daily decision making, right? The clients you take, the clients you don't take, the staff that you onboard and you hire and you train. And ultimately, if you have a non-fit, the staff that you part ways with, right? Whether they part ways or we ask to part ways, or it's a mutual thing. Most of the time it's mutual in a lot of ways. So, and it's funny when you put it in the context of childhood, right? Because you and I have some similar stuff in our background. I'm not going to get into mine right now, and you can go into it as much as you want. Like it's a tragic and fascinating story that you tell about your childhood. And when we were asking you, like, what are the top 3 things you want to go over during a podcast? You wrote down trauma, taking risks, and living the life you want. And I found that fascinating. So much so that I put it in my notes, because trauma, I think, is part of everybody's life. And I think the extent of it varies. And then you got somebody like you, that's extreme trauma, right? I know extreme trauma. Let me ask you a question, because I have my own point of view on this. Did you notice growing up as a teenager, there was an inflection point? You could have gone to the left and repeated the trauma. You could have gone to the right and go exactly opposite of that exposure. Did you notice that at some point in your life, whether it was in your mid-20s, mid-30s, whenever it was?
No, high school. So my brothers are older, and they dealt with stuff that I never had to deal with, but I can't get into their story, right? But once they freaked me out, they're like, hey, man, because I was a freaking borderline delinquent, Tom. They're like, when you were at high school, you better get your act together. I was scared out of my mind. My mom enrolled me in a private all boys school. From then, Tom, is when things got on a different path, right? I was fortunate. My mom had the money to put me in a private school. She probably didn't even have the money. She just figured out the money. She found the money. She just, it appeared, right? Because she just sacrificed. And so that is really what changed my path for the better, I feel. That was the inflection point for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I had the inflection point much later for me. Thank God for those inflection points, right? For you, it's your mom and your brothers, and they saved you, basically, right? From a life that could have looked much different. And I appreciate you sharing the story, because and I know you're writing a book about it. So tell me a little bit about the book before we go on to the other stuff.
No, I appreciate it. Just, I'm no writer here. I've never written a book. My wife, when I told her I was doing this, she said, why are you writing a book? I was like, fair question. Smart question, but because I feel like it's a story that maybe could. So just a quick story, and this ties into people we know. I was in the Bahamas at a mastermind in November, and Neil Goldstein. Do you know Neil Goldstein?
Yeah. Well, I'm familiar with him from the mastermind group we belong to. Yeah.
I never met the guy, but we both know John Fisher. I met John Fisher, and John Fisher posted on Facebook that Goldstein had just written a book, And it seemed to suggest like a tough childhood. Instantly, I bought the book. I read it. I thought, I'm going to put my story out there. So the whole point of this is I'm going to lose money on this book. I'm not looking to make a cent. But the thing for me is it's cathartic to write a book, and it's a record of my life for my kids to read. And it's how through a lot of adversity you can build a law firm, right? And I think that's freaking awesome. That's why I'm so blessed to have this life, 2 healthy kids, wife who loves me. And you said when your daughter was born, I mean, that was when my daughter was born, man, that was like, whew. I mean, my son was a few years old at that point, but having a daughter was like
Game changer.
Different game changer, 100%. So, yeah, I want them to have a record of why dad is the way he is, his strengths, his weaknesses, and a lot of it stems back from, the way my father was and was not. So just trying to get that out there and do big things. You're crazy ambitious, Tom, like me. We're doing big things. We have this fire, right? And part of writing a book is just like, why the hell not, right? I mean, it's a challenge, but
right. And you never know. You never know whose life it touches. You never know whose life it provides a pivot point for. I kind of look at the podcast the same way. Like I think about the motivation for doing it, putting your story out there, unashamed, like raw, really raw. Your story about your dad is really a raw reveal that I think takes a lot of courage. So I think it's outstanding.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. It sounds like we're both very grounded. We know our blessings. We're givers. We treat people well. So, your story impacted someone, probably more people than you know about. My story, I hope, can impact someone, right, on some level. And I think that's like important work. Yeah, I'm a lawyer. We handle cases, but like this is kind of next level impact to me. This is like trying to help someone out who may be struggling and needs, to hear a story to get catalyzed or moving in that direction that they're capable of moving in. I think that's next level.
Yeah, I think it also, though, think about it, right? Like you said, trauma, taking risks, and living the life you want to live, right? So let's break that down. That trauma is extreme, right? Witnessing that in your father. So, and the taking risks part. So tell me how being trauma informed, you and I talked a lot about that at the mastermind, right? Trauma informed. And then because we get real raw when they put us on the hot seat, right? So that feeling of, I'm going to use your words. And if you want to cut it out, we can. The waiting for the other shoe to drop, right?
100%.
And yet taking the risks anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So tell me how your background and your journey led you to become a personal injury lawyer and then take the leap to become a law firm owner, which is a much different journey, which a lot of people that might listen to this may not understand the difference. You can be a great PI attorney and not be a strong leader.
All right. So became a PI lawyer, got out of law school, Tom, in 2004, couldn't get a job. You can't be a business owner without being risk tolerant. You have to have a steel stomach at times, frequently, almost every day.
Yeah.
So like,
for sure.
So that trauma, you look at that, it's like, oh, he got through that. How much worse could it be running a business? Like when you see darkness, Tom, like, when you witness that, it's like, well, okay, got over that. Like what's next? And like running a business is hard, but like, it's not so as challenging as other things that life throws at us. So
Absolutely.
That resilience, I try to lead into it and take big bets and take chances and roll the dice and live with it. Just do the right thing and let the chips fall. But you have to, that's not for everyone, right? I mean, it's for you and I. We speak that language and that's great, but that's no better or no worse. That's just what we do. But if you're an attorney trying cases, that's awesome. Like do your thing, right? Lead into what you're good at. But I've always stressed, like, don't try to be someone you're not. I'm not trying to be the trial lawyer because I don't want to be the trial lawyer. I want to be the business owner that employs the trial lawyers and creates an environment for them to succeed and flourish and have a good life. That's sort of the third thing we talked about, right? Living the life you want. That's just not limited to me. That's for my staff. So again, this is sort of like a progression. You got challenge early in life, allows you to take on risks. When you take on risks and things fall into place, you can create a life for yourself that's happy and gratifying, that allows you to open up space to help others, perhaps, right? Maybe they're at a job they hate. They want to be in a better environment, better culture, right? They're looking to, that's my obsession, creating the happiest, healthiest law firm, culture driven. So I see those three things as kind of being tied together. You can't have one without the other, I feel like.
I agree 100%. I think that it's interesting the way you framed a lot of the topics that we're going over, living the life you want to live, right? That looks different for everybody.
What I do, Tom, I do quarterly conversations and I ask, how would you rate the culture here? And I took this from a recent conference as no sevens are allowed. right? Any number between 1 and 10 except a 7. So it's sort of a typical
Okay.
one.
I like that. I like that.
It's a little bit more a truth serum kind of. And so I ask questions. I was talking to my coach earlier about this super early at 7 o'clock in the morning, how I ask questions like, when was the last time you thought about leaving? How would you rate the culture here? How can I do better? Right. And just showing that sincere desire. Because again, you got to remember, I come from dysfunction junction here, right?
Right.
I don't want that. I want healthy. I want thriving, healthy culture. And I'm frankly obsessed with that. And that's what I pour myself into. So yeah, I mean, hearing that someone rates the culture on a 9, I'm like, that's awesome. How do we get it to a 10? Right? Oh, it's at an 8. How do we get to a 9? Right? Just taking the pulse. And my coach said something really smart today. She said, those questions are important because the more honest they are with you, that's showing real engagement, that they trust you. This goes back to Lencioni, 5 dysfunctions of a team. Just asked my team and my leadership to read that. And we'd also just disseminated the ideal team player to the team. And that is, so we're doing this new thing, a quarterly book. I'm not going to require you to read the book. It's up to you. And if you read it, you're going to take something away. If you don't read it, totally fine, right? But just, really having a place, showing, like, I'm vulnerable. I'm here talking about dark stuff publicly. No shame in that. That's my story, right? And my team, they know about my story. So just trying to create a healthy place, a caring place. Because at the end of the day, to me, it's about team first and then client second. Because it has to be that way, or else it's not going to flow. It has to be, I work on the team. That's my focus. I pour myself into that. Then it's like, okay, this is what we set up here. I expect you to pour that into the service of the client, right? And so we have this nice system of people being happy. And again, it's always hard. Like, it's not like, oh, it's like perfect law from here. Like, Play Law Group is a work in progress every day, just like TonaLaw. That's what gets me juiced up, the challenge. Right.
Yeah, look, I mean, because it's funny the way you were talking about our firm, and I think about all the heartache and mistakes and the sleepless nights that went into the point that we're at now, and we're in year 22, right? So, but again, I look back and I go, it's worth it. It's worth all of it.
It's very special, man. It's very special. And it's not for the faint of heart, because you're, once again, leading into what you like. I lead into what I like. But, anyone, for people on this call, lead into what you like. So I've been about 19 years, but I've only been running the business like a business probably for like 6 for years.
So in like year 13, it triggered for you. You said, I could be doing this better.
Even later, like, really? Yeah, it's been honestly like really rapid growth, really fast. I read that book. We just talked about Napoleon Hill's book, joint masterminds, got coaching, 2 coaches. I know what I'm talking about because you're into that.
Oh, yeah.
And you have that fire, that energy. But so this, we've been doubling. If things go well, we will double for like the 2nd year in a row. And so that's
fantastic.
Yeah, but then there's going to be a leveling off. But still, just trying to, the real growth has been probably around just before the pandemic, 2019. Started getting on airplanes, conferences, geeking out on this stuff and leaning into it.
I asked you the one thing that you wanted people to know, and it was adversity comes before success.
Yeah.
Right? Explain it.
So in a few hours, I think I said this in the intro, I'll be talking to John Morgan in a few hours on my podcast, right? Talking about adversity. Like he put this out in his books. Like, he wasn't born rich. He was born with nothing but adversity. Look what he built. So like, that to me is inspiring. Like, looking at guys and gals like him, Oprah Winfrey, so many successful people had adversity, right? Some of them didn't, but generally speaking, the most successful people out there had great challenge. But what do? They kept going. They persisted, give a little bit more than the next guy or gal, right?
Right.
That's what I'm all about. Doing it every day. And I think I know you're the same way. Daily habits, golden habits, right? Just killing it, pouring yourself into this, right? You and me, that's what we're doing. And I think we both can agree it's worth it, but boy, is it hard as hell.
You're running a successful practice. I know how hungry you are. And I use the term needle mover all the time, right? You've heard me use the term needle mover, right? And there's needle movers in everybody's life, whether it's in an inner circle, whether it's, I've listed out my needle movers before publicly. What would you say were your top 3 needle movers that have gotten you from when you opened your doors to where you are right now?
Recently, the past few years, meditation has been a massive... Do you meditate or no?
I do.
You do?
I do.
All right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Meditation for me has been a needle mover. I feel like that's like number 1, 2, and 3. Like my marriage is better now. I'm a better father now because I'm a like pretty devout meditator. It allows you to process things in a very clear, you know this, I don't have to tell you, process things in a very clear-headed way. But like my wife is a needle mover. Like she pushes me, and she encourages me. Coaching has been a needle mover. Those 3 things are just my off-the-cuff response, but there's a lot. You talk about like 80-20 type stuff. Yeah, that's probably the majority of the needle moving precipitators, I would say.
Yeah, again, we share a lot of that stuff, right? To me, when you say culture, I get it. Like, that's everything. That's, you know what? I will say this, that your focus on culture, 100% is going to be a huge impact. You're impacting the 15 people's lives that work for you every day, and you're giving of yourself, and all you're asking back is, hey, these are our core values. If they speak to you, please act in alignment, right? So I think that's really admirable. If anybody's in need of a personal injury attorney in the Massachusetts area, Chris Earley of the Earley Law Group, he is the guy to go to.
Appreciate you, Tom. Hey,
and man,
you're inspiring to me, man. I told you, I'm trying to get to where you are, man. So I'm hot on your tail.
I appreciate that, man. And listen, I look at guys, and again, I'm 54. I look at John Morgan, who you're interviewing, and I'm like, he inspires me, man, because there is no reason he has to be that hungry at this point. I've heard him speak publicly and I've read his books. I'm a huge fan of his, right? And I go, well, if he's still doing it and he's hungry with all he's accomplished, I got to keep going, man. I got my sights on that.
So started.
Yeah. Listen, I want to thank you for coming on, Chris. It's been awesome having you. I'd love to come on your show. And yeah,
I'm excited. We'll definitely make it happen.
Yeah. I'm excited to listen to your podcast. And Chris, thanks again for coming on, man. You're awesome.
Yep. And Chris, can you let everybody know where to find you, your website, your book coming out, and then, of course, the Early podcast?
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Both you and Tom. Thank you so much for the opportunity. You put on a great podcast. So, again, it's the Early Law Group. I'm going to give my cell phone. Is that okay if anyone wants to reach out to me or no?
If that's what you want to do it, man.
Yeah, I mean, I like to talk about this stuff. So you heard the podcast. You kind of see what I'm about. So if this interests you, let's chat. My cell is 617-956-2501, 617-956-2501, or shoot me an email. It's cearley, that's EARLEY, cearley @earlylawgroup.com. I hope, anyone listening, you can hear the passion. I love this. I'm a geek on this stuff. And that's why, Tom, I like what you're doing, because you have energy, man. And that's infectious.
Thanks.
Speaking my language, so keep it up.
Thank you. Listen, man, I wish you great success with the podcast. I'm sure it's going to be a great listen. And I would encourage everybody to, if you're not following Chris on LinkedIn, he's putting out a lot of valuable content and he's not asking anything in return. So that to me is a true mark of a pro. So I appreciate you, Chris. Thank you for coming on and have a great day, man.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.